Welcome back, everyone. If you're the kind of person who loves digging past the surface to get to the real truth of complex topics, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're launching an investigation into something so common, you're literally wearing it right now: the clothes on our backs. We're going to uncover the hidden, massive, and frankly fascinating systems that put that shirt in your closet. Get ready, because this explainer is going to completely change how you see your wardrobe. Okay, let's dive into this with a mystery. Picture the Atacama Desert down in Chile. It is the driest desert on Earth. Some parts of it are so utterly lifeless and arid that NASA actually uses it to test their Mars rovers. But recently, some totally bizarre satellite imagery revealed something deeply strange scattered all across this barren sand. We're talking about actual mountains of clothing, thousands and thousands of tons of discarded garments just piling up in a lifeless desert. I mean, how on earth did millions of clothes end up here? Well, the answer lies in an industry that has entirely rewritten the rules of global manufacturing. All right, Section 1, the fast fashion machine. To peel back the first layer of this mystery, we need to trace the supply chain backward and look at the engine creating this massive scale of waste.
You know, for decades, the traditional fashion industry operated on a pretty standard 6-month cycle. You had your summer collection, your winter collection, and that was pretty much it. But then, in 1975, a brand called Zara completely disrupted the system. They shrunk that 6-month design-to-store timeline down to just 15 days. They introduced this whole concept of weekly micro-seasons, basically creating a constant sense of urgency for shoppers. But as fast as that was, it was literally just the beginning.
Because look at how this builds into an entirely different beast today. We've gone from fast fashion to what we now call ultra-fast fashion. Companies like Shein don't just use human designers anymore. They use real-time software algorithms to instantly scrape millions of social media posts and search trends to predict hits and flops. Thanks to this crazy tech-driven model, Shein can pump out between 2,000 and 10,000 brand new styles every single day. To put that into perspective, the sheer volume of new designs that Zara launches in an entire year, Shein matches in a single week. And this brilliantly illustrates the jaw-dropping result of that hyper-accelerated system. 150 billion. That is the number of new garments manufactured globally every single year. It's a number so incredibly huge, it's almost hard for our brains to even process. So let's break that down to our level. That 150 billion, that means there are 14 brand new pieces of clothing produced for every single person on Earth every single year. Even if you haven't bought 14 new pieces yourself recently, that is technically your share of the global output. We literally have enough clothing existing on the planet right now to dress the next 6 generations of humanity. And yet, on average, a single piece of clothing today is only worn 7 to 10 times before it's just tossed in the trash. Which brings us to Section 2, engineered to overconsume. Like, are we naturally just this greedy for new clothes? Or is there some deep psychology at play here? Let's shift from the factory floor right to the human brain. Because fast fashion companies aren't just selling you fabric. They're utilizing highly structured psychological addiction loops. It kicks off with Step 1, engineered FOMO, the fear of missing out. With micro-seasons changing weekly, the message is clear: if you don't buy it right now, it's gone forever. Step 2 taps right into our neurochemistry. Scoring incredibly cheap items triggers the exact same dopamine reward pathways in our brains as gambling or drug use. And Step 3 normalizes the whole shebang. Brands flood our social media with haul culture, where influencers unbox dozens of cheap garments on camera, glorifying massive rapid consumption to billions of viewers. And honestly, the byproduct of this relentless marketing is this brand new kind of toxic shame. Just look at this data point out of the UK. A staggering 33% of young women now consider a piece of clothing to be old after wearing it just 1 or 2 times. Social media has essentially weaponized repeating an outfit, turning it into this huge perceived social insult. Once you're photographed in it online, the pressure is totally on to never ever wear it again. But here's a fascinating bit of context for you. This isn't some modern accident born out of TikTok. This exact playbook dates way back to a 1932 book called Consumer Engineering. It literally described artificial obsolescence as the art of selling things to consumers before they've even used their new things properly. It's about intentionally designing a culture that convinces you to discard a perfectly good item simply because it's no longer the absolute newest trend. The fashion industry didn't invent this, but they have absolutely perfected it. So, who actually pays the hidden physical cost for all this? Welcome to Section 3, Toxic Rivers and Microplastics.
let's pivot to the unseen victims of this game, our global ecosystems and, shockingly enough, our own bodies.
The real secret ingredient in cheap, fast fashion, it's plastic. Today, roughly 60% of all our clothing is made from synthetic materials, things like polyester, nylon, and acrylic. And when you toss these garments in your washing machine, the friction releases up to 6 million microscopic plastic fibers in a single wash. These microplastics are so incredibly small that standard water treatment plants just can't filter them out. They flow straight into our rivers and oceans. We are talking about an annual volume equivalent to dumping 50 billion plastic bottles directly into the sea. And naturally, what goes into the water system inevitably ends up in us. Scientists have now discovered these exact same microplastics embedded deep within human lung tissue, flowing in our bloodstreams, inside our livers, our kidneys, and astonishingly, even in the placentas of unborn babies. This massive environmental disaster is directly linked back to our personal health, carrying serious risks of oxidative stress, genetic alterations, and even DNA damage.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the alternative to plastic isn't completely harmless either. Take a look at the water footprint of natural fibers like traditional cotton. Manufacturing just one single basic cotton t-shirt requires 2,700 liters of water. That is enough drinking water to keep one human being alive for 2.5 years. A single pair of jeans, 7,500 liters, or 7 years' worth of drinking water. The sheer drain on global resources is staggering. And the geographical consequences of all this thirst and pollution are just catastrophic. Take the Aral Sea. It was once the world's 4th largest lake, completely drained and turned into a toxic desert just to water cotton farms in Central Asia. Or in Tirupur, India, which is a huge garment export hub, chemical dye runoff has literally turned the Noil River into a toxic sewer and dropped local groundwater levels by 15 meters. Globally, the fashion industry is responsible for 8 to 10% of all carbon emissions. To put that in perspective, that is more pollution than all international flights and maritime shipping combined. No way, right? Well, this brings our detective arc full circle to Section 4, the global dumping grounds. We produce 150 billion garments. We wear them maybe a handful of times. So where do those 92 million tons of annual global textile waste actually end up? Let's revisit that anomaly in the desert.
The vast majority of our discarded clothing gets shipped straight to developing nations under the guise of secondhand goods. In places like Ghana, they receive so much overwhelming, unsellable fast fashion waste that they literally have a specific term for it, Obroni Wawu, which translates to dead white man's clothes. Over at the massive Kantamanto market in Accra, millions of items flow in weekly. But up to 40% of it is of such incredibly poor synthetic quality that it is immediately trashed. This leads to horrific scenes on local beaches, where thick 6-foot-high walls of tangled plastic clothing waste literally form the new coastline. But we are seeing a shift happen at the highest levels. Global governments are finally stepping in to regulate this largely unchecked industry. For instance, France recently passed legislation imposing a €5 environmental penalty on fast fashion items. Over in the European Union, they've outright banned companies from deliberately burning their unsold inventory, which, by the way, was a classic tactic brands used to artificially induce scarcity and FOMO. Furthermore, by 2027, the EU is set to introduce digital product passports. This will legally require garments to carry a scannable history of their exact environmental footprint and material origins. But hey, while government policy is moving, we don't have to wait around for laws to pass. Let's look at Section 5, How to Fight Back, and focus on some structured, totally actionable solutions you can implement in your own wardrobe today. First off, become a smarter consumer of materials. I highly recommend taking a quick screenshot of this fabric scorecard. You really want to avoid Tier C completely. Those are the virgin plastics like polyester and nylon that shed all those microplastics into our water. Tier B features standard cotton and recycled polyester, which are okay, but they're still pretty heavy on resources. Tier A steps it up nicely with organic cotton, which avoids toxic pesticides, and Tencel, which is made from wood pulp. But the absolute ultimate goal is Tier S, recycled cotton, which requires zero new farming, and organic hemp, a highly durable, biodegradable supercrop that uses negligible water and actually regenerates the soil it grows in. So the crucial point is that we can individually dismantle this artificial obsolescence playbook right inside our own homes. Step 1, aggressively normalize repeating your outfits. The whole idea that wearing something twice is embarrassing is literally a manufactured lie designed to sell you more plastic. Step 2, wash your clothes way less.
Most jeans and jackets absolutely do not need washing after every single use. And learn some basic repairs. A missing button is not a death sentence for a good shirt. And step 3, step off that dopamine treadmill entirely and only buy what you genuinely need.
Which leads us to a fantastic, simple rule I want to leave you with, the 30-wear test. Next time you're holding a piece of clothing in a store or hovering over that buy now button online, just stop and ask yourself one question. Will I honestly wear this at least 30 times? If the answer is no, put it back. By shifting our mindset from disposable microtrends to long-term value, we take back our power and protect our planet. So ask yourself before your next purchase, are you wearing your clothes or are they wearing out the planet? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.